Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining today's Resideo webinar session, where we are going to be talking about Resideo water heater accessories. My name is Jamie Quanrud, and I'm part of the Resideo Academy team. And on behalf of all of us, I'd like to welcome you to our training session today. You can find information on our webinar sessions posted to our website at resideo.com/webinars. And we currently have the schedule for all of our October sessions on this website. You can find information on upcoming webinars by searching underneath that discipline tab of either HVAC or plumbing on the left-hand side of the search bar. And then you may notice that we are now offering webinars on HVAC and plumbing topics each week. So be sure to register and attend each of those upcoming sessions we have. Additionally, you can also find recorded sessions on this same website by selecting on demand on the right-hand side of these filters. For our contractors who are joining us for our live session today, and if you are interested in earning one NAE continuing education credit, there are just a few things to note. If you provided your NAE ID on your registration form, we submit those details to NAE for your attendance of today's live session, and we won't need any additional information from you at this time. If you did not provide us with your NAE ID on that registration form for today's webinar and you'd like to receive credit for attending our live session, we do ask that you email your first name, your last name, your NAE ID, and the date of the session you attended to homes.university@resideo.com within 1 week from today. This information is submitted to NAE 1 week following the close of each live session. Any requests that are sent outside of 1 week from our live training today cannot be processed. And as a reminder, we can only process requests for NAE credits when you attend the live webinar sessions, and we are unable to process requests for watching a recorded version of these sessions. If you'd like more information about the NAE program, please visit their website at www.natex.org. And then one quick note before we begin our technical overview today, all of our attendees are muted. However, if at any point during our technical overview you'd like to ask a question, please go ahead and use the Q&A feature that is found in your Zoom webinar controls. We are reserving the last few minutes of our time together today to answer any of your questions that you might have. So as we progress through our technical overview today, make sure to ask those questions in that Q&A feature so that we can address those at the end of today's session. Today, we're going to turn over the presentation to Chris Tamino. He is one of our Resideo water sales leaders on the East Coast. Chris is going to be sharing his knowledge of our Resideo water heater accessories with all of us today. So Chris, we're going to turn things over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jamie. Again, my name is Chris Tamino. I am the East Coast water sales leader, where I manage the sales and distribution of all of our potable and our hydronic portfolio for the Northeast. And again, today we're going to be kind of reviewing, not only the accessories, we're also going to be kind of going through a quick review on just water heaters overall. There are many types of manufacturers of water heaters, and I just wanted to relay the message that Resideo is the largest OEM supplier of combustion components for not only natural gas, but for propane tank style water heaters. And additionally to that, we also supply all of the thermocouples for tank type water heaters. So whether it's State, A.O. Smith, American, Bradford White, or Rheem from a retail perspective, we supply all of these combustion components to you. And then we also offer a really good comprehensive cross-reference in our water catalog. You can find this page on page 18, where all you really need to do is look at the OEM part number that's on the gas valve, or simply the model number of the tank, and you go to page 18, and then you can cross-reference it to the part number that you would need to order from your distributor. As you can see, again, we offer these gas valves from Bradford White all the way to Rheem, And also, pre-new code with the installation changes and then post code with the installation changes. So if you have any questions about where to find this water catalog, feel free to reach out to your local territory manager and they can get you a copy of that. Or if you have an email address to your local territory manager, they can send you a copy of it via PDF. So every home is a little bit different, right? We have homes that are, natural gas or propane predominant. We have homes that are, 100% electric. And then we also have homes that are a little bit newer or that have been upgraded that you might have, some kind of newer tankless type water heater. Or if you have like a boiler in your house, you could see an indirect. And then, nowadays with a lot more efficiency requirements from the federal government and some newer expectations to reduce carbon footprint, we're actually starting to introduce more heat pump style tank type water heaters where we're actually using refrigerant. So, wherever you see these types of tanks or ways to heat your hot water, there are accessories outside of these systems that will increase the efficiency for the end user. It'll actually increase the profitability for you and to produce a better quality product. These big box items, they're just the start point for a project to deliver a good quality job for your customers and your homeowners. Well, we're going to start with what we've been seeing a lot more in the marketplace. Traditionally, we've been exposed to like a tank, like a 40-gallon, a 30-gallon, all the way up to 120-gallon, storage tank in a basement, whether it's a residential application or a commercial application with a burner, a gas valve, a thermocouple, or a thermopile. I mean, that is mostly what we see out there in the past. Well, in the past few years, there's been a big push from new construction and a lot of different manufacturers like Navien and Takagi and all these others to reduce carbon footprint, get a better efficient system in the house by introducing tankless water heaters. Now, there's a common misconception about tankless water heaters where they are instantaneous, which means every time you turn the tap on, you have hot water in a second. Well, that's actually that's not really true unless if you introduce some kind of a recirculation system, which you can see here in this picture. Now, what recirculation will do, where you have more control in the operation and the predetermined time you have hot water to your taps. So let's say if you have a system that's sitting idle all night, you're obviously saving money because you're not wasting, gas to heat that tank when you're not using it. So this tankless is sitting idle, but you can set this recirculation system to turn on at like 5 o'clock in the morning or whenever you're going to start having your usage, and it'll actually turn on, get that hot water line warm and bring it up to temperature so it's at your taps for when you're ready to go. The alternative is if you don't have a recirc system, you can get a situation where it's an industry standard called a cold water sandwich, where let's say your wife or you get in the shower first thing in the morning, you take a nice hot shower, and then you get out, and then someone else goes and tries to hop in the shower, they turn it on and it's actually still hot. And then they hop in, and a second later, what happens is you get a sudden drop of temperature at the tap. This is called a cold water sandwich. This is the recovery time it takes from the last time you had usage to the new time it has usage, because that's how long it takes for the tankless water heater to recover. So introducing recirculation will give you more of a control in the matter, so you don't have this issue. That's more of an annoyance. And you also, on this picture, on this illustration, you see a mixing valve. Now, some people might say, well, why would I have a mixing valve on a tankless water heater? Because I can set the output temperature to whatever I need. Well, you can actually increase that temperature, target temperature, to 160 degrees, and mix it back down to your operation temperature, which is like 120, 125, which you have codes for it. And you actually increase the output. You're maximizing the output of that tank or that tankless water heater its fullest. So if you have like a 75,000 BTU tankless water heater, and you have it, checked for or set to hit at 160 degrees, well, it's going to ramp up to get that 160 degrees to cover the demand. And then you have your mixing valve to mix it back down to 120 at a safe temperature. So this is one system that we would see that is most commonly, it's actually more commonly being used in the marketplace. Indirectly heating potable water. This is a system that's been around in a commercial industrial application, in a residential application for since boilers have been used. So we all know that boiler systems and steam systems are the oldest way to heat your home. Some benefits with heating your using a boiler as your domestic system is consolidating your gas. So instead of having a gas type water heater, either a tankless or a tank type gas water heater, and then having a boiler, which are two gas appliances, you can consolidate those into one system where your boiler, or you're using the capacity of the boiler to heat that water as quickly as it possibly can. Obviously, this is a big benefit, increasing the efficiency of the home. Now you can even get better. So if you have a wall hung boiler, those high efficient boilers, you're even maximizing that turn down ratio. So if you have a system with like a 15-to-1 or a 10-to-1 turn down ratio on a wall hung boiler that's super efficient, you're really going to be doing your customer a favor by adding a domestic water heater and consolidating these two features. Now I will say, if you do have a high efficient system, you're probably going to ramp up and use the higher capacity to heat this tank, because when you have this type of system and you're in a space heating application, you have a control that we also supply. It's a boiler controller, HPSR or HPZC system that will prioritize the demand for the tank. The reason why you want to do that is because you want the hot water right away, and you're not going to see the change in comfort while your boiler is prioritizing the tank. Usually you want to set the differential for startup on the indirect water heater about a 20-degree differential, meaning you want it to start up when you have a 20 degree, when you're 20 degrees below its target temp, and you want it to stop when you're roughly around 10 degrees above, just to make sure that you're maintaining that temperature and actually you're not short cycling the boiler. So again, just to review, you are prioritizing the tank using the full boiler capacity to heat this hot water as quickly as it possibly can, and you're utilizing only one gas appliance to do so. Now, I mentioned the differential the differential control on the indirect water heater. You might want to consider, and I would highly recommend installing a mixing valve on top of that, because there's no other additional control inside the domestic hot water to say, hey, I'm too hot when I'm sitting in idle. And what you would want to do is make sure that you have that mixing valve on there to regulate the output temperature at 120 degrees, which is, again, is a safe operating temperature, and what you want to, and what many codes call for coming out of the tap. So again, I've had a situation back in Colorado where it was a multifamily project, and they had a couple of TurboMax water heaters, and I would get the call like first thing in the morning. The first person that takes a shower, they get a hot shot. It's like 160 degrees coming out of there. And well, because that design of that system is that it's storing hot water and it's maintaining that differential, which at plus or minus 10% on the top end. So it could have just ended its heat cycle at that point, and you were actually sitting on the higher temperature side because it overshoots to maintain, you're not short cycling the boiler. So I was like, you put in a mixing valve and you can alleviate that issue. Also, recirculation helps out with that to maintain, and it gives you a little bit more control. So again, if you do have a boiler system and they don't have an indirect water heater, I would highly recommend talking to your customer about putting one of these in, because then you're utilizing your full boiler capacity. Let's get into the Resideo, the products overall. I kind of gave you a couple of different scenarios of what you would see out there in the marketplace. Obviously, there are hundreds of different types of conditions in a home. You never know what you're going to walk into, but you want to be prepared for everything. So everything you see on this page are accessories that will increase the value of a tankless or an indirect water heater, whether it's gas, electric, or any other type of heating style for heating water. And I also want to mention that every time you purchase a Honeywell Home Resideo product, whether it's a thermostat, indoor air quality, residential thermal solution product, or our hydronic and potable products, you earn points. And those points directly convert into marketing things to market your company. You can buy tools and all sorts of stuff. It's a really nice benefit to better your company and to continue to grow your business. And if you're not familiar with perks, again, reach out to your territory manager. They can walk you through the whole program, give you all the details you need, and get you signed up. And it's a really, really nice program to be a part of. So mixing valves. I've mentioned mixing valves already a few times. They are very critical to both a residential, commercial, potable system, and as well as a residential, commercial radiant system. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But whatever condition you have, we have a mixing valve to fit that condition. So whether it's a cross-style AM series, an AMX series, AMX1 series, on a residential side, we can support that. And then on the other side, we even cover mixing valves for a commercial application. So if you have a big 120 gallon plus tank type water heater that you're moving a ton of volume through, I would look at our commercial mixing valve, our AMX series. This also comes with a 1/2-inch recirculation port, and it's a true tempering valve, which means it can't be adjusted without having the tool, which is just a basic Allen wrench. But a lot of inspectors in a commercial space want to see that it can't be tampered with, because if it does, and you get to a point where scald is an issue, there's a huge liability there. So that's huge value when it comes to the MX series. And then even better, we have a under the sink mixing valve, where the MX series is great, but it could be costly in certain spaces. The MX is a very low cost under sink mixing valve, which is point of use. They both have 3/8 on either side, 3/8 compression, so it hooks right up to your water lines. And you can either use it in a 3-port application or a 4-port application. And we actually supply that 4-port T without ordering it separately. So it's a really nice feature, really inexpensive, and has a lot of value to better your outcome. So quick review on why we want to use mixing valves. Quite simply, Legionella prevention. We are all hyper conscious and hyper focused on making ourselves healthy or preventing ourselves from getting sick these days. I know top of mind is COVID, but Legionella is a sleeping giant in many homes and in a lot of multifamily places. Legionella kind of showed his ugly face way back in the day when we were storing water on the top of buildings without any kind of recirculation, where it was just sitting stagnant. It will not only grow, but it'll multiply very, very quickly in those types of applications. And that can actually stand true in tanked type water heaters. So we'll talk about why mixing valves will stop that from happening. Scald protection. This is a very, very unsafe situation when you have a water heater that you're trying to kill Legionella, but you don't have a mixing valve. It only takes a couple of seconds to scald your skin if you're in a bathtub or taking a shower or washing your hands, let alone a small child in the house. So a lot of municipalities and states have put a hard requirement that you can't even install a water heater without having a point of use or a point of source mixing valve to prevent that type of danger from happening. So, and then it also increases your hot water output. When you put in a tank water heater without a mixing valve, to make sure you don't have scald, you have to set it around 120 degrees. And we all know we have an A, B, C, or D on there. We don't actually know exactly what's coming out of it because it doesn't give a digital readout, but we set it somewhere in the middle. And we're only utilizing some of the actual power of the BTU to heat that water. So if you have a 40,000 BTU and you're turning it down, we're only using a portion of its capacity. So using a mixing valve can increase its hot water output by basically turning into a high output water heater. Well, again, Legionella bacteria, really want to hit this at home, that there is a real danger for Legionella to be developed in a storage style water heater. It could be airborne. It causes like an influenza type of reaction. So I think I think you understand the danger of it. So let's talk about how to get rid of it, how to prevent it. At 140 degrees, Legionella will die instantly. But we all know that 140 degrees, we can't have that at the tap because of scald. So we put a mixing valve on there, turn that gas valve up to 140 degrees or to, let's say, C on the gas valve. Then we know we're heating that water to the point where it kills the bacteria. And then between 122 and 131 degrees, it can still live, but it won't multiply. Now, why is that even in there? Well, let's say you have let's just say an accident happens and someone turns down the water at the gas, or it goes into vacation mode and you're walking away. Well, obviously you're not going to be running at 122 or 131 degrees because your operation is really, really low and you're trying to save money when you're on vacation. Well, that's when it could multiply. So it's already in there, but you're dropping the temperature, trying to be advantageous of your gas usage. But all of a sudden your tank temperature drops and you're not home. Guess what's going to happen inside that tank? That Legionella is going to blow up and it's going to grow inside that tank. So that's why that's a circumstance that could happen. And then anything below 122 degrees, it'll just grow rapidly. So again, 140 degrees, you want to make sure we're killing that Legionella, keep the family safe, keep the tenant safe, or anybody that's attached to this tank style water heater. And again, there's experts out there that say, recommending your water heater to be set at 140 degrees to kill Legionella. So the AMX or the AM1 series mixing valve, this is the tried and true valve. We've had this valve in the marketplace for going on 30 years. It originally started off as the Sparco valve, but now we are the Brockman valve or the Resideo valve. It has a Teflon coated, it's a patented Teflon coat thermal actuator. So if you have water conditions that are a little bit more harsh, it will withstand that hardness in the water, and you'll have a lot more longevity in there. The sizes run from 1/2 inch all the way up to 1 inch, and we have connection ends from NPT all the way up to push connect. Sometimes I get people asking me about the NPT not having a check valve. Well, if you do need a check valve, which many applications do require, we do have an additional tailpiece that you can thread onto the NPT mixing valve that has a check. So if you have any questions about that, reach out to your local distributor or your territory manager. We have mixing valves with a rangeability that is labeled with a C from 70 degrees at a minimum to 120 degrees maximum. That is the valve you want to use at a point of use, like a Roman tub. Sorry, lost my train. So at a Roman tub, a lot of municipalities require a point of use mixing valve. This is the one you're going to want to use because it can't be tampered with above 120 degrees. Any AM series mixing valve that doesn't have a C or doesn't have a specific call out is our standard mixing valve that you can use down in your water heater, wherever it is. That will max out at 145 degrees. You still want to max it out at 120 just to be safe, but you do have more rangeability if you have a system that runs higher, like at 180 degrees, but you have a sterilization space where you have to have at least 140 to sterilize equipment or something. You have that rangeability with that valve. And then we have AM series mixing valves rated R, no pun intended, but R is meaning for radiant, where they max out at 180 degrees. Going back to the hydronic, I'm going to switch hats for a second. Hydronic applications, they can have multi-temperatures in one system, as we kind of talked about. One end of the house could be heated with baseboard heating that requires higher temp, anywhere between 160 to 180 degrees at times. And then you have a direct, indirect water heater that could run at a different temperature. And then you could have a slab in a bathroom or a family room that has a heated floor. Well, you don't want to run that radiant floor at anything over 160. It obviously depends on the design and what kind of heat emitter, if you're using plastic or if you're using onyx rubber or if you're using copper, it all depends. But we do have an R mixing valve to separate those two temperatures within that system. Then jump over to the AMX 300. This is traditionally called the tank booster. These were actually OEM through Bradford White a while back, where again, tanks were becoming a little bit more bigger because of the added insulation to reduce the carbon footprint. I think we all remember that code. So in order for us to actually have the same output of a high output water heater, we put on an AMX 300 mixing valve, increase that temperature. Therefore, you can have a smaller tank to fit in a smaller application to get the performance of a larger tank, if that makes sense. We still have these available out to the marketplace by themselves. These are a very user-friendly mixing valve where it actually has a couple of different features. One of the features are at the top, you see it has a pre-mixed hot port. So again, let's talk about sterilization. You can't sterilize things with 120-degree temperature water. You have to have at least 135 to 140 to sterilize. So we have that port for that requirement if need be. Again, I forgot to mention that we have two styles of these. So we have an AMX 300 that has an 8-inch center to center for the smaller tanks. I would say it's up to a 60-gallon tank, so a 30 to a 60. And then we have an AMX AMX 302 that has an 11-inch center that will cover your bigger tanks, 60 to 120 gallon if that requirement fits. And I bring that up because if this is being used in a restaurant and you do need the sterilization, you probably have a bigger tank. So keep that in mind. This does have a recirculation port. However, I would recommend making sure that the flow rate on that recirc system fits this flow rate. The flow rate on this recirc port is pretty low because it's tight spaces in there. So just make sure that if you are using that for a recirc system, that it's going to fit in the right application. And if not, we do have an alternative, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. On the cold side, there's another port. If you have an ice maker line, you can tap that in. You could also, if you have a humidifier, I know some people like to use tempered water for humidifier because the heat displacement is a little bit better. But if you can't do that, instead of using a saddle tap, which we all know is very problematic and can create huge leaks in the mechanical room, you have this port for any kind of additional 1/4-inch water line or whatever. So really inexpensive, versatile mixing valve to get you whatever you need. So I had mentioned the recirc port on the AMX 300 was pretty low flow if you need it for recirculation. If you do have a system that has higher flow, like 10 gallon a minute recirc or whatever it is, a little bit bigger, this is the valve you're going to want to use. This is the MX series commercial mixing valve in a smaller footprint for a residential application. I mean that because it's a tamper-free tempering valve where you have to use an Allen wrench to make the adjustment. And then you can see the recirc port on the side. It's a 1/2-inch recirc port. And you can actually use these on tankless water heaters. So a few slides before, I had mentioned putting a mixing valve on a tankless water heater. Why would you do that? Because they don't really, the AM series doesn't have the flow rate to withstand the demand for a tankless water heater. This one will. You can get up to 17 gallons a minute through this valve. So I'm going to kind of speed it up a little bit. I'm going to switch gears. We're going to talk pressure reducing valves. And again, these are all accessories that you can look at when you're installing or servicing a water heater. We have two series of pressure reducing valves. We have our DS06, and then we have our FK06, which is basically just an added feature from the DS06 that can be added onto after the fact. Just a brief review on where does high pressure come from. There's two types of water feeds from the municipalities or the towns. If you're at a low end, usually you have a reservoir up high somewhere where they have a pump and they feed water into the reservoir that it's gravity fed down to the water main going up and down our streets. That's one way. And then the other way, if you're in a higher elevation, like in Colorado where it's switched, well, they'll actually have pump stations and they'll pump the water up into a holding area where then it can actually be distributed to the homes. So the weight of the water will determine the pressure of what you see at the house. So remember, big rule of thumb, 1 foot of water equals 0.433 pounds per square inch. So an installation orientation on what you would see in a typical install. So you have your water coming in from the main, you have a shutoff valve right when it comes into the house so you can isolate. The first thing you'll see after that is a pressure regulator or a pressure reducing valve. This will control the flow so you have a constant flow of water going into the house. And we'll talk about why that's important for a water heater to have consistent flow in a minute. And then the next thing you'll see, a lot of cases now, you'll see a check valve, whether it's just a basic lead-free double check valve, or you can go all the way up to a double check valve assembly where it's testable and rebuildable. But in a lot of applications, you'll start seeing these around. And then expansion tanks. I would say circa 2001, you didn't really see a lot of expansion tanks installed on tank type water heater installs because the enforcement for check valves weren't really being implemented at that time. You just had your water main going in, a pressure reducing valve, if that, and then right to the water heater and then right to the rest of the house. Why do we want to have an expansion tank now? If you have a check valve, there's nowhere for that hot water to expand to anymore. You want the expansion tank, just like in a closed loop system, you want the expansion tank to withstand the expansion from the hot water. It needs to go somewhere. So it's a cushion in the system so your T&P valve isn't being constantly stressed. And if the T&P valve is being stressed, you know the tank on the water heater is being stressed where it's constantly expanding, contracting based on your thermal expansion. So if you have a check or a backflow preventer on the water main, make sure you have an expansion tank, a potable thermal expansion tank somewhere by your water heater. So our DSO6, it's a single stage direct acting pressure regulating valve. So it not only reduces the pressure, it regulates. So food for thought, any water pressure that is 80 PSI or more coming to a house has to have a pressure reducing valve. So keep that in mind. So we want 80 PSI, we want operation anywhere from 45 to 60, depends on what's going on in the house. But not only are we reducing to a safe operational pressure, we're actually making it more consistent. If you have big swings in water pressure, it's going to affect not only your tank type water heater or tankless water heater for that matter, because tankless water heaters are very, very strict on water flow. If you don't have good consistent water flow on a tank type water heater or tankless water heater rather, you're going to have huge pressure swings at the tap. So this is why pressure reducing valves and having consistent pressure are so important when you're looking at a water heater application. And the way it works, it's very basic. Water comes in, it goes in through a pre-screen filter to protect the cartridge. And then you have a corresponding spring at the top. So when you dial it in to whatever output pressure you want, there is a corresponding spring at the bottom that holds the cartridge at a certain pressure that squeezes the water as it goes through to slow it down and also maintain its pressure. So if you do have a sudden increase of pressure on your positive side or on your feed, that spring is going to hold that cartridge tight and it's not going to react to that increase or that swing of incoming pressure. And again, the FAQ6, everything you have, everything we have about the DSO6, but more. It comes from, or it starts at 3/4 inch and it goes all the way up to 1.25 inches. It comes stocked with a 50 micron stainless steel filter that is washable. It's really easily, you just isolate it, spin it out, take the stainless steel filter out, wash it out, or you can just blow it down at the bottom there. You can actually add this feature to a pre-installed DSO6. All you need to do is buy the cup, buy the screen, take the black cup off the bottom of the DSO6 and throw this in, and all of a sudden you have some filtration in the system. Now this isn't a fix-all filter, but if you do have water that has some pretty high grains per gallon, you can start with this before adding, water softeners and really talking to your customer about adding expensive water quality products. Let's talk about leak detection really quick. We do have a water leak detector. This is a Wi-Fi wireless water leak detector with a reusable rope. We've had this in the marketplace for quite some time now. When I was actually out in the field, I would use this product as a gimme when I talk to the customers about installing a water heater. It's like, listen, if you sign with me today, I will throw this Wi-Fi water leak detector in for free. And not only does it, act by itself with a 120 decibel alarm, but it also ties into your Honeywell Home app, and you can see all these other features that it has. One other thing that I would like to mention about the hardware portion of it is that rope that you see can be extended up to 700 feet. So if you are at like a college, or if you have a multifamily project and you want to have, instead of having multiple water leak detectors in one mechanical room, you can have one and extend that rope all the way around the room and the perimeter, and you're taking full advantage of it. I had one school that actually used these water leak detectors to find where a leak was in mechanical rooms, because they had multiple mechanical rooms around the estate. So they used this as an indicator. So it's pretty cool. On the software end of it, it does a lot of features. So I mentioned that it has a 120 decibel alarm, but it also does temperature readouts. So if you have a basement that's, hot, cold, whatever, you can actually monitor that temperature. And you don't actually just have to put these in the basement. You can put them by a toilet, underneath a vanity, in the kitchen, and you can identify each water leak detector for where it is. So let's say if it starts to read moisture in the kitchen, well, then you have a kitchen water leak detector is the problem, and you can direct your plumber or yourself to go fix the problem. And not only does it do temperature and water, but it also reads humidity. I have a very wet basement, and my dehumidifier is constantly running. I don't have it draining into the sump pump. I just have the tank of water inside my dehumidifier. Well, once that water is full, or that tank is full, my dehumidifier turns off. How do I know when it's ready to go if I'm not, constantly going in the basement? My water leak detector will send me an alert. If the humidity starts to spike, I know my dehumidifier is full and I need to go empty the tank. Pretty basic, but it's a really good added feature with the water leak detector. So I'm going to kind of run through the average costs on a water heater install. Basic, a lot of places you go to a water heater install for a quote or a service, and what you would see is a tank sitting there with your water coming in with a ball valve and your hot water coming out, and that is it. Well, let's build this. An average cost for a tank type water heater usually costs between $1,200 to $4,500, depending on the circumstances and conditions. Thermostatic mixing valves that you see on the top, which is the AMX 300, are required by many states and municipalities. This will prolong the risk of scalding. This will increase the performance so you could get more out of the tank, and it'll reduce the risk of bacteria infection. So talking to this about your customer, if they want to justify the cost, these are some key points that you're going to want your homeowner or the customer to know to justify why this is installed. Not only that the inspector requires it to pass an inspection. And additionally, you want to make sure you talk about the pressure reducing valve. You go into a project, the first thing you want to look at to make sure they have is a pressure reducing valve. Ma'am, do you have any issues with pressure in your house? Do you see fluctuations? Are you having, a loud noise? Do you have leaks constantly? Your pressure, your T&P valve is leaking. Let's take a look at your pressure in the house to make sure that it is within code standards. If it meets and exceeds 80 PSI, we're going to have to put these in. And this will also help with your new water heater and its life and longevity. Expansion tanks. Expansion tanks, we talked about that earlier. Ma'am or sir, you have a double check valve assembly on the house, but you don't have an expansion tank. This is why your tank is bad. So before we put in this new tank, and you're going to spend $1,200 to $4,500, whatever it may be, on this new tank, we're going to want to add in an expansion tank. This will increase the longevity of the new tank and to ensure that you are getting the most value from this install. Or we want to talk about a normal complaint that I used to get all the time with a homeowner is, I have this bathroom on the other side of the house, and it always takes about 20 minutes for me to get hot water. And this is my master bathroom, and I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I can't stand waiting for my water to get warm for my shower. How do we solve this problem? Well, sir, we can install a recirculation loop that you can have control of the timer. So every morning at 3:30 in the morning, that timer will trigger and it'll turn on your recirculation system. So you have hot water at your taps. It's easy. And then water leak detection. You go over to a house, you got to call for a leak in the water heater. Now your basement's flooded. We'll replace this water heater. Here's some added value. And we also want to put in this water leak detector so this doesn't happen again. So all these accessories outside of the big box are an absolute necessity. And these are all conversations that you can have with your customer to increase value and to build the relationship so you can have some reoccurring revenue down the road and have that customer contractor relationship.
Fabulous. Thanks so much, Chris, for walking through that presentation today. I'll let you catch your breath and take a drink of water if you need one. If you're interested in finding out any more information on the products and accessories that Chris covered today, you can find that information at our Resideo Pro website. We will also be sending an email in a couple of days after this webinar with links to some of the information that Chris has covered today as well for your reference. We're going to transition now into answering some common questions that our team gets regarding some of these products. And just as a quick reminder, if you have any questions on anything that was reviewed today, make sure you take a few moments, enter that information into that Q&A feature that's in your Zoom controls, and we'll do our best to answer those questions in the time that we have remaining.
Thanks, Jamie. So first question is, what do I do when a TMP valve is leaking? Well, first thing I would look at if the TMP valve is leaking, ask the customer if the TMP valve has been opened. I used to find out that a lot of people would do their own blow down or their own drain down on their tanks to kind of blow out the crud in the bottom. And the way they would increase the speed to drain it is that they would open up the TMP valve to introduce air to blow it down. You do not want to do that, because if you exercise that valve, you risk something getting stuck in that TMP valve, and then it will never, ever, ever work again. So that is the first question I always ask a homeowner when a TMP valve is leaking. The next, if that doesn't have, if that's not an issue, the next thing I would look at is the general age of the water heater. Maybe it's beyond its life expectancy. These days, tank type water heaters can last anywhere between 5 and 10 years. I know that's a pretty big rangeability, but we all know water conditions are different everywhere we go. So check the age of that tank, make sure that you are in good shape. And again, talking about what we reviewed earlier, if the house has a backflow preventer on, if someone came in and put on a backflow preventer, but didn't put on an expansion tank, didn't put on that thermal expansion cushion, well, you probably killed that tank. That constant expanding and contracting where that expansion had nowhere to go, it's probably time to go, and you're going to have water dripping out of that TMP valve. Will the Wi-Fi water leak detector stop a leak from happening? Unfortunately, no, it will not. It's just an indicator that there is something going on. I mean, you have humidity in there that'll tell you what's going on. It'll have temperature. You can set temperature alerts. It does have the alarm. It has the reusable rope. So it has a lot of features to tell you that there is a leak happening, but no, it will not shut down and stop the leak from happening. However, I will mention that there could be something coming in the near future that will talk to the water leak detector. So stay tuned. Can a pressure reducing valve be used as a backflow device? No, it cannot. A pressure reducing valve is only a pressure control for reducing and regulating pressure. It will not stop a sudden loss of pressure and will not contain a home if there is a sudden loss of pressure on the water main. And where can I find the Resideo water catalog? Again, reach out to your local territory manager or your distributor or whoever you commonly talk to for information. We also do have a new website which is our water landing page. And it's the Resideo Pro /water landing page. And you can find all the information you need on that website. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Chris. We will make sure to include the link to the landing page that Chris was just mentioning with all of the water products that have been covered today, along with the resources for the Resideo water catalog as well. And Chris, you did such a great job that we don't have any questions today. Last call for questions kind of before we close out here. I will say this, if you do think of a question after the close of our training today, please reach out to either your local Resideo sales rep, or you can always send an email to homes.university@resideo.com, and we will make sure to route that question to your Resideo sales rep so that you get that question answered. All right, and with that, training is definitely something that we are passionate about here at Resideo, and we want to make sure that you have access to in-depth training on our products. And recently we launched our online learning platform where we have several in-depth technical and sales trainings for all of our customers. And you can access this online training catalog by visiting the training page on our Resideo Pro website. The first time that you access that online training catalog, you'll be asked to create an account, your Pro Portal account, as it's called. And going forward, you'll log into that training account to access these trainings. And currently, we've got about 20 online learning modules that are available, including one on pressure reducing valves. We've also got information out there and modules on our humidification portfolio. We also have modules on our Prestige IAQ thermostat, as well as our T10 thermostat. And these online trainings cover everything from technical and installation details. And they also show you how to identify the right customer to sell these products. And we're very excited to be adding this online training catalog to our training efforts for all of you. So as you have time throughout your week, and as fall is starting to peek its head around the corner here, and you might be interested in more in-depth trainings, we do encourage you to sign up for a Resideo Pro Portal account to access these trainings. And Chris mentioned earlier, if you are a Resideo Pro Perks member and you take those online trainings, you will receive training credit when you enroll and take those trainings as well. And then we also are publishing our schedule of weekly webinars on our resideo.com/webinar page. If you search by either the HVAC or plumbing tabs, you will find details for our upcoming sessions on the website. Also, we record each of these sessions, and you can find those recordings on this same website by filtering for webinars with the label on demand. And then one last reminder for our contractors who did not include your NATE ID on your registration form, and you would like to receive credit for today's session, make sure that you send an email with your first name, your last name, your NATE ID number, and the date of the session that you attended to homes.university@resideo.com within 1 week of today's live webinar in order to receive credit for attending today's live training. And then there's two things to note as our training session ends today. You are going to be prompted to complete a survey regarding our webinar session. Please take a few moments to provide us with your feedback on the training that you participated in today. We are very interested in your feedback, not only on today's session, as we use that feedback to help us create future trainings. So your feedback is important there, but also please provide us your feedback on other training topics that you'd like to see us cover in the weeks and months to come. And then finally, you're going to receive an email from us in a few days that includes some follow-up information on the products that we reviewed today, as well as a link to the website for information on our future webinars. We will also share a link to our Resideo water catalog for your reference as well. Make sure you join us next week on Tuesday, October 5th at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time for our next training session on thermostatic radiator valves. Thanks so much for joining today's Resideo webinar session. Have a great day, everyone.